Hi, my name is Scott Rhodes. I work in the IT department of Taters Incorporated, and today I'll be discussing migrating to an open source operating system. For this, I've chosen Linux Mint OS. Alright, so in this slide we'll be going through the pros and cons, the system requirements, hardware upgrades if any are needed, the Active Directory integration, since we have a Windows Server 2012. Also going to be discussing features and usability, as well as the user interface, and of course applications, and then IT support tools, and then the Linux Mint support in general. Alright, so pros and cons. So Linux Mint 21 is the current version. They do have a long-term release that's supported up until 2027. So every time they put out a release, they do support that up to 5 years, which is LTS, long-term support. And this can be used commercially without a licensing fee, so there won't be any cost involved in that. The cons would be the training time for employees and IT staff. Do expect that to be minimal. There are some training requirements just to get staff acclimated to a new OS, but it's fairly similar to Windows, and that should be a pretty painless process. So next we're going to take a look at the system requirements. Now the bare minimum system requirements, that's 2 gigabytes of RAM, and of course 4 gigabytes is recommended just for comfortable usage. That just helps things run a little bit better. And 20 gigabytes of disk space, 100 gigabytes is recommended, so not a whole lot of storage space there involved. And then just a minimum resolution of 1024 by 768, which is pretty standard for most monitors nowadays. And so one of the pros here is that there's no hardware upgrades required. It meets all of our system specs, and it actually qualifies for the recommended. So all of our systems have 4 gigabytes of memory already. So there's not going to be any need to upgrade the desktops currently. And on a plus of that is there's no need to change our current Windows 2012 server operating system. And that's because of the Active Directory integration, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. So Active Directory integration, since we have a server that is a file server, exchange server, and application server, we don't need to make any changes to that environment. So we're able to utilize Samba, which is to integrate into Active Directory, and that can function both as a domain controller and as a regular domain member. So what we can do is just have our desktops, once they're migrated over to Linux Mint OS, utilize Samba, and we can connect to a Windows Server 2012 and continue on with our file and exchange and application servers that we would normally do anyway. So features and usability. Office Libre is a open source office file program, so it's compatible with all of Microsoft Office files already. So any documents that we have saved, it can easily be opened in Office Libre and saved as a different file type. There shouldn't be any issues with compatibility in terms of our Office applications. Accessibility. There's many accessibility features that are built in, so anyone with issues with sight or hearing, there's quite a few features there that will assist them with that, similar to Windows. And it also has a very similar Windows layout. Multiple profiles to fit first and second shift employees, and we have some departments that use those, so we could have them log into their profile and log out at the end of the day, and then when the second shift comes in, they can log into their profile without a problem. And it's just a familiar layout, which helps reduce training time, which is important. and some of the applications that we'll use, and these can all be accessed through the software manager. It's pretty straightforward. So there's Zoom, of course, for video conferencing. That's an important one. Dropbox for cloud file storage. There's also Google Drive if we were to use that as well, and then Slack, which is a company chat messaging system. And let me just take a quick peek at those here. So this is the Mint OS. You can see here that there's a start menu, very similar to Windows, as well as the clock, volume, network, and you can see I have Slack and Dropbox running here already. So if you were to open up Zoom, it looks exactly the same as Windows. So join a meeting or sign in. And if you were to open up the file system, you can see here it's desktop documents. Very similar to Windows layout here. You can access all of your files and folders very much like you would in a Windows environment. And there's Dropbox and Skype. We open Slack. Same thing with the Slack. It's very similar to the Windows environment. And we have the VLC media player, of course, that does plays pretty much all your media files if we ever needed to do that. So you can see it's got a nice, simple, clean layout, just like you would have in Windows. And you can right-click and go to Customize. We can customize our desktop settings. Very much the same. Alright. And accessibility. So there's quite a bit here. The visual, of course, high contrast, large text, screen reader, desktop zoom. Pretty straightforward, what you'd expect from those. And then the keyboard, on-screen keyboard. Windows has one of those as well. Visual and audio indicators for caps and numlock and event feedback. It just helps. Visual indicators. And then with typing assistance, you have sticky keys. Windows has the same typical feature. This is be, modifier keys is like Shift, Control, Alt. So if you were to press those in rapid succession, you would get a sequence combination there. Slow keys, that's just kind of delays if you were to type too quickly and make a mistake. It puts a little bit of a delay in there. Bounce key just ignores fast duplicate key presses. And then the mouse control, it controls the pointer using the keypad if you were to have a keypad. Simulated secondary click, so you can hold down the primary mouse button, which triggers a secondary click, just kind of an assistance there. Hovering click triggers a click when the pointer hovers over something. So you can find these and you can search just like you would in Windows. So that's all I have to type in, and you automatically see all the features here, which I just reviewed. Alright. And IT support tools. These are important for the IT staff. System restore points, that is considered time shift. So just like before, if we were to go to time shift, and this is where you would create a restore point in case there was an issue where you needed to back up to a certain point, where if there was an issue with the operating system. That'll let you do that pretty easily, and there's a wizard involved in that as well. And then there's system updates, which is under the update manager, so same principle here. Update manager. And it looks like I do have an update available, and you can install these updates, and you also get an icon down here, one update available. Pretty straightforward, and you can schedule this stuff. If you want to go to preferences, you can open up days, hours, minutes, and just set when you want, the Windows to, or I'm sorry, the Linux Mint to update. And you can kind of schedule that out for everybody to have it all at the same time, and then, test and all that fun stuff. So, and Linux Mint support. So they offer a nice bit of documentation there, just for, just general reference. And they do have forums, so you can discuss, any issues you're having or suggestions that you need. It's just a way to, connect with people. And they do have chat, where you can actually chat directly with the support team. So there's a lot of support there if you need it, and they don't charge anything for that. So just to cover everything we got, so no licensing fees to install and use Linux Mint OS. It is completely open source, and their support is as well. And there's no need for us to upgrade current hardware, which is good. And the Active Directory integration, of course, is important. That means we don't have to change our server environment to what we already have, so it will work seamlessly with that once we get that set up. And the applications available to meet our current needs. That's very important, like Office and Zoom and those things, and those are readily available and pretty easy to update and install. And there's many accessibility options, of course, if anybody needs that kind of assistance with their computer. It's great to have that stuff built in. And then there's tools for IT support staff built in, which is nice. That gives us kind of an easy way to assist with any issues or schedule updates, or those kinds of just general IT stuff. Create a restore point. And then Linux Mint provides documentation, forums, and chat like we just talked about. It's pretty nice to have those resources available to you, even on the user end. Certainly for the IT support staff, that's a very useful resource, but just general knowledge as well. And lastly, we have some citations here. There's, of course, the Linux Mint website, straightforward, just linuxmint.com, and then support, which is under Contact Us PHP. So yeah, that's about it, and thanks for taking the time.